Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Bailey. I am the Arts and Health Lead at the World Health Organization. Welcome to our discussion. It's called The Pilgrimage and the Pandemic. And we are going to be talking about the confluence of health, art, and spirituality in a particular place, in this case, Saudi Arabia, at a particular time in the middle of a global pandemic. We have a wonderful panel together. We have the artist, Dr. Ahmed Mater. We have Hamza Serafi, who was the founder of Saudi Arabia's first gallery of contemporary art. And we have Dr. Hanan Balkhy, a colleague of mine at WHO, who's the Assistant Director General for Antimicrobial Resistance. Welcome, everybody. First, a brief introduction. Today's UN 75 dialogue discussion is part of the Future is Unwritten Healing Arts Initiative, major collaboration between Christie's, WHO Foundation, the World Council of Peoples for the United Nations, and Culture Runners to support a global response to COVID-19 through the arts. The initiative is part of the World Health Organization's Solidarity series of events and the United Nations 75th Anniversary Initiative UN 75. The Future is Unwritten is a global initiative which facilitates urgent cooperation between the international arts and culture sector and United Nations agencies in order to support the implementation of the UN Global Sustainability Goals. A special thank you to the Open Mind Project, the Future is Unwritten 2020's programming partner. Our discussion today is set against the sale of Dr. Ahmed Mater's Mecca-inspired Magnetism installation. Mater's critically acclaimed work is being offered as the first artwork in the Healing Arts Initiative and was donated directly by the artist to show solidarity with the WHO and to support our cause. Magnetism is a timely indicator of this year's Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, which was scaled back and left the holy site mostly empty for the first time in its history due to COVID-19. Now, to start us off, I'd like to introduce the artist to all of you and invite Ahmed to maybe show us the work of art itself and perhaps the shrine as well, to give us an idea of visually what we'll be talking about today. Ahmed, my friend.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you again and with my colleagues Hamza and Hanan. And it's for me was very important year to read and to know more and to review a lot of things during this year. Also, you know, it's a connection to spirituality. You know, this work, which I will start to share my screen. And this work is a very simple artwork. It's a magnet. The magnet itself is part of a practice that I start doing this as an experiment from 2012. And the idea was based on an experiment that we work with. You know, like when we as children, we usually play with the magnet and iron filing. So the idea built itself by practices, but from these practices, I start to think about our memory. When my family talk with us, and they talk, when you go to Mecca, you feel attraction. And this is stuck in my mind. I was really, my idea or my connection to the place was the idea of attraction. And it's beautiful. It's, I think, the idea of spirituality. We have this kind of ourself. Different from the actual space, there is something bigger or beyond that, which is the concept of attraction. So I start doing this artwork as a small piece. Then from this, I start to develop it. And I will show you now one picture. This picture is the main picture that will be in the auction, and it will be an installation. And maybe I will my idea to give a 30-second to see it, to think about it. So the picture is appearing now, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So can we have 30 seconds? Just see it and imagine through it.
Yes, please.
Yeah. from this imagination or this feeling of attraction, I start, you know, it's becoming a big story. I went to Mecca. I work for, maybe if Hamza was with me in the beginning, I go to start to I want to document the story of the city. Behind this, there was big story of attraction of Mecca is the most visited place, the most exclusive for the Muslims. It's the center for us in the world from the beginning, from the children. So that was a big, for me, big site of research. But also as a medical doctor, I study community medicine. After my medicine degree, I started to study community and family medicine. So mass control was a big importance for me. I practices in some places there with the communicable disease and with understand, but in the same time as an artist, I see it from other practice as well, as the feeling of memory, the memory of people, the connection itself. It has a big things spiritually, and that's very important in our time, especially now in the program WHO, which is the well-being program after COVID. It has mental wellness. It has a big question and big understand. We have all to be part of that and help. So I will show you also another video. If you see this video, I was also in Mecca when I was to one of the first video that start to do this. Then I will show you also this image. If you can see the mass or the amount of people in Mecca. And Mecca is about similarities, about people together. So that was the famous scene in Mecca. Mecca is about, you know, the mass of people sharing one idea, sharing one faith, one future, one hope. Also, I will show one another. Look at this picture. I don't know if it's clear to see the umbrellas. Those people going in one line, and they go to Mina, place called Mina. I will not go in details of Hajj, but I mean, imagination of people have this strong faith, and their practices and spirituality take them with the big belief. I think this is in our mind, and philosophy has a big, you know, reference inside us. In pandemic this year, first time in my life, I imagine or see this picture. For me as an artist and man who spent like 5 years doing one project of art, working with the mass of the Mecca, then see Mecca empty, which is, I think, the first time in the world. They mentioned many times the Mecca was less, but not empty like this. Then there is beautiful picture. After that, I saw it one by one, and we follow the news. I was following news every day. For example, like this picture. I will not go through details of this picture because Hamza was there, so he will explain better than me. But it's very interesting to share the distance and how this practice becoming now during this year. There is a lot of things to talk about this picture, but maybe I will let Hamza after that to explain. So that's generally was the story that maybe it's in this talk or in this speaking. So I think magnetism or the beast, I had something that connected me to medicine, but also can connect me to WHO. When I was studying medicine, WHO is the big things, the big institutions that we usually think about or we go. So I think to put this artwork in the auction was small contribution and a dream for me to contribute, to be part of something that I usually, you know, and I think it's responsibility also from my side.
Well, we're deeply grateful for your collaboration and your donation, certainly. Could you talk a little bit about your evolution as an artist? Now, you began as a physician, not as an artist. And what was that bridge? And how did you make that leap?
Medicine, during my time studying, in the beginning when I studied the first years, medicine and 7 years study, so it's a long practices when I studied in the college in Abha, south of Saudi Arabia. I find the connection by putting this understanding in my mind. I find medicine in the part of common sense, of medicine for me becoming this science that's a stand between subjectivity and objectivity. So it's a science, but also it's very subjective science at the same time. So common sense is a big, big part. And I didn't understand that when I start medicine, but in the middle of the college, middle years of the college, I look to the medicine in the big part, big understanding. Medicine, very important as a common sense science. You have to grade, for example, when patient come to me, I have to grade the patient, know his name, at least before he come to my clinic. For example, I say hello and I mention his name. That the biggest connection for that, the real part of medicine that I really want, feel it. Then I think I find art is as the same. Art is stand between subjectivity and objectivity. Sometimes it's the science, sometimes it's a poet, sometimes it's imagination. So I think that's part which make me interested to art. And art, for me is a big, big thing. It's a philosophy. It's understanding more in our life. So it's a big solution. It's behind a lot of science and imagination, and it's take us to the future. So maybe this part is my philosophy to that, my contribution between this.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think, for me, my reaction when I look at the artwork and visually, you see this image of the pilgrimage, but in actuality, you see a magnet with iron filings in a pattern of the waves of magnetism. It's also equally about science. It's about natural law. And for me personally, how I was affected is at WHO in my sector, in global health, I often run into this creative tension between medicine, public health on the one hand, and arts and expressions of spirituality on the other, as if they are contradictory. And you have unified them into one. And that's pretty marvelous, I think. I'd like to bring in Hamza into this conversation. Now, Hamza Serafi, as I mentioned earlier, founded the very first gallery of contemporary art in Saudi Arabia. So he has been a pioneer with Ahmed in introducing a change in Saudi Arabia in terms of artistic expression. Just to start us off, Hamza, when you first saw this particular work of art, what was your emotional reaction?
Well, being with Ahmed and starting when this whole project started, and to see how enthusiastic he was about discovering and about knowing more about Mecca, and he used a lot of the networking and the people around him that really supported his vision to take a contemporary look at what's going on. And as Ahmed developed the project, he came to this artwork, which somehow represent, as you said, in an artistic way, the energy of the place, and how that sort of immediately connect, because we are a very spiritual nation in general, and the work just resonated immediately. It didn't need interpretation. It didn't need any explanation. And the beauty of contemporary art, that it also carries a lot of, that it can be read in so many different ways. And I think that's where the genuinity of Ahmed's work, that his work is timeless. It could be in the now, it could be in the past, it could be in the future. The work is totally genuine work. That's how much we like his work.
Thank you. Can I interfere with something I remember?
Yes, please,
also?
please.
Actually, when I come to Mecca, I had the fear because to carry my camera and to go, because Mecca has a special connection to the people in Islam. But really, Hamza, he was brave that he take me. He was one of the first people who believed in me. Hamza and Muhammad from ATHR Gallery. Hamza take me with the car. We go together and we walk before we take photography, and told me, Ahmed, you have to connect yourself to the place, then you can go to it. I like that. And he believed me without any question. Then we go and we walk. We do tawaf. We say, you have to do, it's like, so this was a good beginning. It was the real attraction.
I'd like to welcome my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Hanan Balkhy, into the conversation. Dr. Balkhy is the Assistant Director General at the World Health Organization for Antimicrobial Resistance, but she also just happens to be from Saudi Arabia and in fact from Mecca. And we thought we might ask her a little bit about both the public health aspect of what happens in a mass gathering like the Hajj during a public health emergency, and how did Mecca respond, but also more personally, her own feelings about the Hajj, and in particular any reaction. In fact, why don't we start with that? Welcome, Hanan. Would you like to give us your reaction when you first saw the magnetism work?
Thank you everybody. Assalamu alaikum. And again, you got a group of people, all of us are from Mecca actually, and not only that, but me and Hamza are related in a certain way. So we are somewhat distant relatives. You Hamza, nice to see you. Marhaba marhaba Dr. Ahmed. It's a true pleasure, and without knowing the details of this event, when I got the invite from Christopher, I was like, yes, absolutely, I'll learn about what this is later. But I was extremely touched by the magnet, and it struck me when I first saw it. I'm like, this is amazing. And I was even struck even further when I realized that it's a magnet. I just thought it was maybe, a piece of Lego or something, but the fact that it's a magnet, I don't know how they're not all squished together. I'm not very good in physics, I guess, but it's a beautiful piece. And I think someone who loves art myself, yet I'm very intimidated by art because I don't know how to draw even a house with a sun, but I love going to art galleries, and I find people who are able to express their feelings in such a way are truly gifted, and they have a gift from God, if you will, that is very, very valuable, and to be able to express feelings. And I think Dr. Ahmed, if I'm not mistaken, the fact that you did that, it just shows the intense emotions you have about the place, about the event, for you to be able to think about it so hard to create this piece of art. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations to you on that. Again, yeah, I'm a pure Mecca girl, from both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. And I was explaining to Christopher the apprenticeship education process that used to take place around the Kaaba, the house of God, and how my grandfather from my mother's side is a long generation of leaders and educators in the Grand Mosque, Sayyid Alawi Malki, Allah yarhamu. And my mom used to play on the domes that were part of before the expansions. So to see this event and to be very worried at the beginning of the pandemic about the mass gathering issues and how are we going to react to this pandemic, and will it calm down before, if you remember, the pandemic started before Ramadan of last year, and we were all, okay, let this finish because we need to start going and worshiping in Mecca during Ramadan. It didn't happen. We were locked up during the Eid. And then we were like, okay, we have a month and a half to clean this up, and then we want to have our Hajj because we cannot stop our Hajj. So the people and the Muslims and the people from Mecca and all over the world were waiting for this pandemic to go away so they can go back to their spiritual performances and go to the Haram and go to Mecca and Medina and perform and all of that. I think Saudi Arabia needs to be congratulated, the custodians of the two holy mosques and the Crown Prince, for the very courageous and bold and necessary protection and limitations that they had on the holy sites and also on the mosques for the Friday prayers at one point. And the best way that the Hajj was described to me when I saw the pictures of the pilgrims, which were very limited in number, one of my colleagues at WHO said this was so choreographed. And choreography is a word that you use in art, right? It's something that you choreograph a dance or a song.
Yes, we use it a lot.
You use that word a lot, but you don't use it with a religious gathering, if you will. And the fact that they said it was a choreographed Hajj this year, I think that was the best description of it. And I think that stems, as I told you, Chris, when we were talking, it comes from the mandate of Islam of being a very conscious religion, of protecting its constituents and human beings and living agents and living entities in general, that they are very sacred. Human life and life in general is sacred. And taking from the religious teachings that if there was an outbreak during Prophet Muhammad's time, it was said that if there is an outbreak in a community, you need to wall that community off, which is the basics of quarantine. So I think when we ask about what were the major milestones of the global response to this pandemic, Saudi Arabia stands out clearly in how it managed the mass gathering and created a role model for such needed interventions in future outbreaks or pandemics.
Well, that's just wonderful, Hanan, and I think it illustrates a couple of things. One is a theme that emerged in the earlier part of the conversation, that medical science is not necessarily in contradiction to spiritual practice or belief. In fact, they can be mutually supportive. And in this particular example, it actually goes back to the Quran. And then the other is something that I think is very important from a public health perspective, is that when we look at different communities around the world, how do we find the local context that gives the health intervention meaning, that doesn't feel like it's coming from this outside space, but actually makes sense within the context of a people's belief and story system. It sounds like Saudi Arabia was successful in doing that in this case, with the stakes incredibly high. So Hamza, maybe you could give us a little reflection on your eyewitness sense of Mecca during this period, and also what, if any, role did art have to play in trying to make sense of this difficult time?
There isn't, Dr. Hanan, she covered most of the, most importantly, it was the decision that was taken to protect lives and the value of that shows you that the leadership really understand the value of things, not just the price and not just the. So regardless of the economic effect, the lives of the people were the most important. And of course, people were totally in disarray, if that's the right word, while we're witnessing all of this. You see images that you wouldn't believe and that you would see it in a lifetime or you would never see it. Although we had in the narratives that there were epidemic about 100 years ago where similar things that happened to Hajj. But for us in this modern time, for this to happen was quite extraordinary. The most important thing is the lessons that we can learn from this. And I believe that happening in there is always a positive thing about everything that we see. From the people extremely think that we were the virus and maybe the corona came to slow us down and to make us treat our planet Earth in a much better way, and also to be to do action again, instead of all what we do is a reaction to everything that is being thrown at us. So it was a good time to breathe and to think. And I think what happened in Mecca at this time, that especially with the system, once they figured out the system of how to allow people back in and keeping the safe distance and keeping the social distance and keeping the people safe, literally, would be the base of a new logarithms that we will learn in the future, maybe to handle more masses, because we are embarking on a great development infrastructure on all around the holy area. So controlling the masses and protecting them is a step. We have taken the first steps in that direction. Your second part of the question, how does art if we think of art as an identity, as a human, as a tool, as part of the culture and the society, there were so many roles that the art played in keeping the spirits of the people and in creating some artworks that debates the idea of quarantine and the idea, discussing the idea of home, the idea of connectivity, the idea of family, all of the above. And it was culturally, it was from the top of the pyramids all the way down, from the Minister of Culture announcing that he put a personal effort in connecting with a lot of the people in the art fields to support them and to give them the inspiration to go ahead and keep the dialogue and keep the spirit in the community, in their communities. For example, one of the things that we did in ATHR, we created an initiative called Ma'an, Together, and it was quite an that we still quite an initiative. The initiative was a group of artists, of lead artists, donated their work and created a special collection, and the society became very involved, and the money that came out of this, we created grants for artists in need. And today, we are witnessing the result of marvelous artworks that again talks about how they lived the era of Corona. So that keeps the people through. We opened the art spaces for public with the profession, and to our surprise, everybody, the reservation, it was fully booked. So that means people are still engaging, people are still acting, and we are acting in a more civil way. keeping the distance. And so art is only a part of the whole healing process. And I think it's a very important part.
Well, I think you've also touched on an interesting duality, which is that on the one hand, we know that art can provide comfort and context in a difficult time, bring people together as a community. And so it does have a role to play during an anxious period. But at the same time, particularly in this pandemic, as you pointed out, artists are part of that group that's most severely affected by the economic consequences, because they often don't have a salaried position. They may not have health insurance. They may be worried about how they're going to make rent the next month. So they are often the first to volunteer their skills and their artistry to a cause, but they also are a group that are in need. And that's it's wonderful that you found a way to be able to harness that energy positively for the group, but at the same time benefit them as well.
Of course, thank you. And it's amazing. I mean, the artists were so inspiring and full of beautiful stories. One of the grantees took the money for a different reason, and then he still yet decided to go and buy paints and buy paper and produce a new kind of work beside his personal needs. And that. So
yes.
There you go. There you go.
And with the donations of art that we've received for this Healing Arts Initiative, those artists that can afford to donate are certainly encouraged. But those artists that can't, that are in need, connecting them with programs like this where they can find some relief or just simply be paid for their work is essential.
We're very grateful to what you're doing, Christopher. Really, that's a great initiative, and thanks to Ahmed also for donating this work.
Well, Ahmed, can you talk a little bit about your sense of your peers and how this moment has affected them?
When we talk about, thanks for the digital time, allowing us to communicate in this time. And I see a lot of artists, really, especially the young artists, because it was, very important time in their life to move and to try and to grow up during their practices. For many of artists, they start to donate, not just actual, also information. I saw a lot of artists, they use, for example, online connection to teach, to inspire, but also some musicians, they from different part of the world, they start listen for free in the online for helping artists to grow to a thing. Also, one of the good things in this time, like let's think about the positive part. All of the world sharing same problem, so it should connect us again and more. And that's a big part. That's artists come back and join everyone. Art was a good meditation and healing part of our life. We come back to our art, but also with the digital facilities, we be able to share. I did many talks and many visits to my studio during this time, and it's like an open studio. And they did it in many museums and many places that to help to make connection. Sometimes it's a small words can change a lot of life and an artist.
Well, maybe we should touch on this notion of the healing power of art. What does that actually mean to each of us? I'm going to put Hanan on the spot, and as a pediatrician, a public health expert, but also as an art aficionado, what do you think we mean when we say the healing power of art?
The healing, it's a philosophical question, but I think it's a very...
Or is it?
Or is it? It's a very important question. And I think, again, what I wanted to talk about is the impact of the art on the behavior of the individuals, and for us not to minimize that. And I think I wanted to pull what I've been trying to, if I can show this the way I showed it to you, Chris. I'm going to show you a piece of art. I was back in Riyadh. I was lucky to go back home for a few days in August, and there's an art gallery next to my home, and they actually had an art gallery for COVID specifically. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a female artist. I don't recall her name, and she has these ceramic plates that are painted. Each plate, they're like multiple ceramic plates painted, and the face is half male, half female, but the mask is the flag of Saudi Arabia, and then there are these doves, birds that are beautifully flying on the side, signifying nationalism, peace, but also to me it signified compliance with public health measures. And as angry as the communities have been, I think an artist, when she does that, she is giving that hidden message of being part of the community in fighting COVID. And you can see on CNN, they bring a very simple way of saying, you know, the mask, it's not a political statement. It's, you know, it's to prevent transmission of disease. And this artist did exactly that through her art by saying that when you do wear a mask, it's nationalistic, you know, it's pride, it's peace, it's the dove birds, it's a beautiful male and a female. It took me a few times to look at it to realize that it's a two gender picture, but I picked it up eventually, and I just fell in love with it. So I think the artists have the way of implicitly giving messages and implicitly mobilizing communities to act and to express those feelings. And I think, again, maybe Saudi Arabia was a little bit late in coming to the international stage on expressing the art in a super free way, if you will. And we stuck with our cultural beliefs and religious beliefs in not embodying emulating God's creation, and stick with geographic or nature and whatnot. But I think images like this, I think, would have a major impact on the communities. And I think that's why it's very important that we do engage the artists and allow them to really bring it all out and be part of what we're doing in public health.
I think one of the things you mentioned,
agrees with me or not, but
one of the things you mentioned that
of course
underline a bit is you talked about, you know, some communities quite understandably being anxious, maybe even angry at the situation. And the beauty of the artist is that intuitively, they don't just give a message. That's part of it, certainly, but it's also about listening, and it's about feeling how the other person is feeling, and as part of the authentic experience. And to me, that's where we come closer to mental health support. It's not denying there's a problem. It's actually finding an expression of that problem that brings us forward, that helps us find a path. And that may be different for many of us, I think. Hamza, I wanted to ask you, related to this, you know, again, getting back to this notion of the healing power of art, at WHO, our definition of health in our 1947 Constitution is that health is not defined as merely the absence of disease. It is the highest attainment of physical, mental, and social well-being. And I'd like to think that art over the millennia has evolved to support all of those things. With the introduction of a freer environment for contemporary art in Saudi Arabia, have you seen the societal health change at all?
In the spiritual and in the spiritual feeling, of course, because that's what normally art does to you. Once you are touched by beauty, once you are connected with an artwork, then you're not the same person anymore. Your collective experience has changed, and you have evolved from one status to another. So, and also the lessons learned, especially through contemporary art, is the debate that it creates, the questions that it imparts through the work. And not only the questions, but also the debate around it and how people can differ about it. And yet to each one is his own, and we can talk about it and we can reach a conclusion and we can agree and we can disagree without being two parts. It's a community debate, and that sort of created a vibe for people to come and participate more. Little by little, they appreciating the beauty automatically with time changed the society into a cultural society, into somebody who appreciate life. And I think that's the most important factor of art. That's how it changes people's life. And that's what we've been working at and trying to do for the past 12 years since this whole new movement started, the contemporary movement. Although Saudi Arabia is relatively young in the art movement itself, the modern movement started in the mid-60s, all the way to the time of when we started about 12 years ago with Ahmed and other artists and the gallery and the whole movement. It was such a prosperous time, and we are living the joy of it, and especially with what's happening now in Saudi Arabia. The cultural scene is really changing and developing on so many aspects, on the institutional side, on the academic side, and most importantly also on the grassroots initiative. And we are seeing very, very interesting times and happy ones.
So
I say.
At a societal level, there seems to be a sea change in terms of the way people engage in the arts. On an individual level, Ahmed, as an artist, what has your life transformed? What about your emotional evolution as you move from medical science as a physician to artistry? What changes happened in your life, in your feeling?
Yeah, this is usually the question, often from the family. It wasn't easy because, it's a big decision, but there is many change in personal, but also during this time. I think for me, it was not easy, but it was as a hope from long time, because an art has a big, dream for me. So moving to another side of art, I becoming more, engaging in understanding philosophy of a human being, and art is allowing me more to study and to go and to understand. My artwork usually about research and going to understand the influence and the feeling, and even the mental study. Art has a big role on this. So it was different from time to time, but lately, last year, and I like what Hamza say, there is a very nice time movement inside Saudi Arabia and the cultural growing, and the young generation moving very fast and bravely. Also, it's I think I called it the time that the grassroots want to go up, but also the government also going to meet that interest, which is a good time now. And that's, I think it's perfect because it serves both sides. And the pandemic time, I think art was for me a big healing, big, personally. Art was the thing. I really, feel the art was the best practice. I believe more and more in that, and it was my daily practice. I isolated myself in my studio, my art studio, and I work every day.
Yeah, so there may be some benefits, and I think I don't want to diminish the suffering that individuals go through during periods of isolation and anxiety, but I do think, and again, the arts are not a silver bullet in terms of mental health by any means. It's one method of reaching out, of trying to make sense of things. But I'm reminded of a Wordsworth poem where the first line of it is, "Nuns fret not at their convent's narrow cell." And the idea is that a period of confinement can either be a prison or it can be a place of birth. And in a sense, the same thing could be said about our bodies ourselves, that our bodies can be a container, a trap, or it could be a womb. It is a place where life and ideas and love and emotion can be nurtured and emerge. And if I can draw the parallel to your artwork without embarrassing you too much, I'm just imagining myself, if I were a practicing Muslim, if I had wanted to go on the Hajj this year and couldn't, and I saw your artwork, could I create a holy space in my mind? Could I bring that into my heart? And would that work of art help me do that? And I would think yes.
Wow.
And that's a profound gift for people.
Thank you. Wow, that's very amazing.
Hanan, in your engagement with medicine, public health, one of the traps that we find ourselves in the medical profession is to be overly clinical, to be scientific, and sometimes, the expression is coldly clinical. Have you used your appreciation of the arts to balance the intellectual part of your job that is so much of it with a humanity?
That's a great question. It's I don't know that I've ever actually thought about it the way that you phrased it, but I think I surrounded myself with a few very great female friends who are well, actually, one of them is medical, but she doesn't seem like it because she's talking about her art all the time. I hope she's watching. Ahlam al-Shadouhi, she's one of my favorite artists. I've shown you some of her pieces. And she's a pathologist, Ahmed. So she's someone who, under the microscope, is fascinated by the dyes and the colors and the cells and the molecular presentation of histopathology. And I think she was inspired by histopathology, but she says she liked coloring as a young girl. So Ahlam is one of the major Saudi artists, upcoming Saudi artists, who's done a great job in that. And I don't know, I'm a bit hesitant to say that I've never really linked art with my medical practice intentionally. I'm trying to think whether I've done it unintentionally or unknowingly. But unfortunately, I come from an era of a very traditional medical school education and practice, unfortunately. And I think lots of interventions have came later on, even using animals for therapy, using art for therapy, music for therapy. So those things were not part of our curriculum. And someone who's not artistic by nature, I did not find a connection in my practice for that. But now I'm finding it, as that picture that I showed during the pandemic of the mask on the face, and there are a few others that I've been using on my Twitter account. But I think that there is definitely a major role. I think I've used spiritual attachments more in my clinical practice, especially practicing. I was a physician for 20 years in the National Guard hospitals, which really deals with a very specific community. I never had a private practice, but I dealt with the National Guard population very proudly for 20 years. And it's a simple population that is, they're very traditional. They're very ingrained into the culture and the religion. And I'm someone who comes from a background that I understand how that plays very, very well, and the relevance of the spirituality in these in the patient's daily life. So I tried to use it as much as possible and ensure that they do use their spirituality for healing, because I think there is a role there, while not ignoring scientific and literature-based medicine in cure and in treatment.
And I think that's an important point, that when we talk about the intersection of art and health, it's not a zero-sum equation. It's not saying because we embrace art, therefore we are subverting the science, or vice versa. No, that we believe in evidence-based decision-making. We believe that in order to find the objective truth about whether something works or not, there is a scientific method to find that out through evidence-based processes. And that is but to say that there is not an art in that is not true either. It's finding that intersection, I think, the humanity of it. And in fact, just to lead us there a little bit, it's interesting, in the conversations that I had with all of you before this dialogue, one thing came up as sort of a common denominator, and that was each of you had an interest in what Mecca was like before Islam. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and then how that plays out in terms of the future we might want to imagine. So for our viewers who may not be familiar with the history of the Arabian Peninsula, what was Mecca like before the Prophet?
We'll go by the oldest. That's not me.
Well, you see, a lot of people sometimes forget, what Mecca, when Mecca really started. Mecca started in the time of Abraham, our prophet Abraham, who built the Kaaba, the house of God. So since that moment, since this house was created, people start flocking to the place. So it turned into one of the earliest melting pots, cultural melting pots. So people come from all over the places on earth. They heard about the place, and then they come, or they get the calling, or there must have been a system at the time, or the sort of the people hear about this place, and they come to it. With time, a civilization occurred around this place, a civilization that what we hear when we read the golden poems, for example, which are poems that were said by poets pre-Islamic era. And from those poems, we can learn not only the beauty of the language and the narrative and the story, but also the social life and the multi-layering and the way they used to live. And we start to understand that they had a sanctuary system. They had months where they don't practice hunting. And then they have conventions for poetry, where poets and literature people come and gather in a certain time of the year to hear each other and to assign a leader for the coming era. And the one who wins the best poem is written in gold water, and it is hanged on the Kaaba, and that's where the Golden Poems name came from. So it was a very prosperous time with a lot of good civil initiative and community initiative. And when the Islam came, it came to complete the good deeds. So everything from previous civilizations was accepted, as long as it is for the better of humanity, because that's what religion are originally all about, is to make us better humans, or to guide us the ways to be better humans.
So it was a gathering place of many different peoples from all over the area, a place where people shared poems, art, stories, science, learning, teaching, a vibrant place, it sounds like.
Yes.
But very importantly, it was a trade path also on top of all of that. So it was among the trade path. If you came from India to Yemen and Hadramaut, the southern of the peninsula, going through Mecca to Medina, then to what we call it Bilad al-Sham. I don't know what that is in English.
Damascus.
Damascus and Syria, Palestine, you know, that whole area.
Influences from East and West.
Exactly. So it was part of the trade path on top of all of that civilization that Hamza was talking about, and an intellectual site for gathering. And then so that was all taking place before Islam.
Also,
I think there was also the Silk Road. Maybe Ahmed can tell us a little bit about.
But also one of the things that I will say, one of the beauty of the story, that they called the poetry, the famous poem that win, al-mu'allaqat. Al-mu'allaqat in Arabic mean the hang, the writing, or the piece that you can hang. And they was hanging the winners in Al-Kaaba. They put it in the wall of Kaaba, which is called mu'allaq. And Arabic word mu'allaq, that means you can hang it, you can put it up. So that was the beauty. Kaaba was the place that the winners they put their poem on the walls of Kaaba. So that's a beauty. But also Silk Roads was part that ending, or sometimes called the Indian Ocean route. On the same time, which is mixing culture. So people come to Kaaba and they teach each other, or they collaborate for different and understand the poem and the language and also in the architect. You see, Mecca has Indian, has African, has Asian, has a different part of architect and elements, and the architect, or in the life, in the words, in the food, cultural food of Mecca is very rich, because this kind of civilization which meet each other in that point. So it's very important place for many interesting, cultural.
What you're describing to me is very interesting. If you look at even deeper anthropology to the earliest tribal societies, millennia and millennia before Mecca was founded, going 70,000 years, it's pretty clear that the first healing ceremonies were also religious ceremonies, were also performance. It was all the same thing. It was unified.
Yes.
And over time, these different genres began to splinter off for very practical reasons. But I think they still share some common DNA. And one of the pieces is this notion that you've all touched on, which is compassion. That in each of these professions, whether it's health, art, or spirituality, it is about, compassion in the Latin means struggle together, compassio. It's about striving together as one. through conflict, finding that meaning, finding that peace. And so I'd like to end with a brief discussion on when we have a catastrophe like a pandemic. Again, going back to the ancient Greek, catastrophe means an overturning, where suddenly all of our assumptions about the status quo have been upended. And we panic because we can't use air travel, but suddenly the sky's clear and we think, well, what does that mean about the way we've been living our lives? We panic because we can't go to work. And then suddenly we discover relationships within the household that perhaps needed strengthening. There's always two sides to every change. So we have a question that's was actually written in the comments of the YouTube channel, and it's from Abdul Rahman in Abha. With so many challenges in our world, environmental, economic, political, what has the pilgrimage and the pandemic during this year taught us about the future we need? Who would like to bite that one off?
Ahmed, I believe we've partly answered that question, that the lesson we learned that things are possible once we think about it, and once how you deal with the pandemic. And I believe that the way we dealt with it, first we stopped and we thought and we saw what is the right way forward, and we took the first steps in that direction. I think this is the lesson most learned, and also that we prioritize importance. What is really important? Is it human life? Is it the economy? What is important? To care for our patient, to stop to maybe slow down our social gathering in the benefit of a healthier community, finding other way of communicating as we are doing today. So the world is changing, and the most, maybe the biggest question is for how long, and if it doesn't continue in this way, how fast will we forget this lesson and what we have benefited from. This is and right now, as you said, we deal with it and we feel for the people who are suffering, but we have to think positively, and we have to find ways of making the life around us better and the quality of life better.
Indeed. Ahmed, some thoughts?
Yeah, I like Hamza, thank you. That's really a great answer. And I think from also spiritual part of understanding, that we learn also how, like when you, Christopher, say, if I couldn't go and can, in my mind, but this spirituality, because we are human, we are connected to the place, we need this part of ourselves. I think it's in both sides. It's give us importance of this understanding of ourselves, but also in the same time how we brought it, understand that we have to think about the reality of which come first. It's an important question. It has this practical and philosopher's view, and that's what happened in front of us. We learn and we see the result together, because the arrangement of Hajj in this way and coming back with the distance, and it's not easy. You know how much they work to control this mass and give this distance. And imagine people come from every part of the world, and the feeling of connection when they arrive to Mecca is something very spiritual. Some people come first time in his life for this moment. It's called the journey of life, one lifetime journey. So it's not easy. So that's for me is a big thing. I'm more watching how they control more than understanding. I'm sure there's big things behind this to happen.
Indeed. Hanan?
Thank you. A very, very great question. I think for, again, the Hajj is something specific to Muslims. And I think Muslims have a strong belief about what is known as al-qada wal-qadar, which is what God's willing. What does God will? And what God is willing to happen will happen. And that acceptance creates in the Muslim a state of what is also known, I'll use an Arabic word, tuma'nina. We have to be in peace with ourselves. We have to be in peace with what God has wanted for our destiny to be. Although at the same time, for those who don't know the religion very well, the Islamic religion there's still a huge incentive to be proactive and do your deeds and be preventive and not to be blasé about things. So that's a very important balance that should be part of a true believer. I think being so, and again, in the 5 pillars of Islam, one of them is fasting. There's a behavioral training process in Islam, which wants to tell us, and although that we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is meant to train the individual to accept less. So even in the teachings of food, you should eat 1/3 of your stomach, because 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, 1/3 for air. So there's less of everything. Always accept the less. And I think looking at most of the world, the pandemic affected the whole globe, but the Western society, we're all living in extreme excess that I think we've never imagined. The human beings will have so much of everything that we have, so much food, so much clothes, so much traveling. I mean, our friends, we've been, complaining how we're not able to travel for a full year. We get on airplanes every 3-4 weeks, and we feel unsettled if we're not traveling and moving. And even for us, the Mecca people, the Hajj to us is an annual event, not a lifetime event. I hate to say that online, but it's something that we like to do all the time because we're right there. And I think there are lessons to be learned in God's will on what's happening. And being a bit spiritual allows you to accept this and accommodate and try to, because the worst thing that can happen to anybody is to go into depression and to a mental health status that twirls down into depression, getting into medications, and that is not healthy. So if spirituality and if this will allow us to accept and to reflect on where we at today with our lives, I think it might be a good thing. From a perspective of how the government is dealing with it, I think they're trying their best to show that this is a very important pillar for Muslims, and based on science and public health interventions, we can allow it to happen with the current conditions, with the distancing, with the knowing every person engaged so that we can do the contact tracing process. So really living the situation to our best abilities is something that we need to learn. And I think for us as parents, maybe it's important to teach our kids this. And as adults, we have to learn how to do this better and better every day. And it's very, very difficult.
That's lovely. I'd like to conclude our conversation with returning to the artwork itself, to the magnetism piece, and maybe make a few observations in addition to the ones that we've made. At its simplest level, when we look at this piece, we see literally black and white. We see opposition. And I rather than it being in conflict, we see it drawing us together, literally the magnetism into one. So rather than being afraid of opposition, we embrace it, because that's where meaning comes from. And I do believe that, I hope that whoever is lucky enough to be the owner of this piece, that they make it publicly available, because it is a gift to people. I think just in the 30 seconds at the beginning of this session, the silence of looking at that piece, I felt a calm coming over me. I felt a sense of reflection. And I hope that whoever owns this actually shares it with the world, because it will be of great benefit. As Hanan said, we have to be concerned with the mental health issues with the pandemic, people being in isolation. And one little piece of advice is, if you think somebody has been isolated and is maybe falling into depression or despair or anxiety, do reach out. But first thing you should do isn't to tell them what to do. The first thing you should do is listen. And that's the beauty of art. It's about listening as much as it is about speaking. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, once said, loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the inability to express what matters to you most. And artists like Ahmed help us all express what is so difficult to say out loud. Thank you all, everybody. And for those of you interested in bidding on the artwork, please do go on the Christie's site and register. Or if you're an artist and would like to contribute to the cause, let us know. But for everyone else, enjoy your life, enjoy your loved ones, engage. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you very much, Chris, for bringing us together. Thank you, Ahmed, for the great work. And it's lovely to see you, Hamza, and to have this discussion. It was really, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Ahmed and Hannah.
Thank you
Always
for
a
your
pleasure.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.